you should not feel ashamed that you can't pay your bills. The system was built to keep you from being able to pay your bills and then to profit from your debt. And as an individual, you can't fight that system. But collectively, we could fight that system.
Voor schrijver en activist Naomi Klein is het onmogelijk om de ongelijkheden in haar stad te negeren. Ze ziet dat de rijen van de voedselbank steeds langer worden, terwijl een paar blokken verder zonder moeite $100 voor een yogalegging wordt betaald. Al jaren vecht ze tegen ongelijkheid, tegen de hebzucht van grote bedrijven en het uitkleden van het sociale vangnet.
Moments of crisis are moments when we're tested. We can demand and reclaim more power, more control for our communities, for our workplaces.
Maar ineens zag ze haar eigen standpunten steeds meer gebruikt worden door de rechterkant van het politieke spectrum.
I'm thrilled to be back with the workers, UAW members and proud patriots of the great state of Michigan.
Een spiegelpaleis waar links rechts is en rechts links. Hier veranderen vredige yoga-instructeurs in antivaxers en vredigt New Age zich met ultrarechts.
We zijn solidair met alle mensen over de hele wereld.
Een wereld waar feit en fictie vaak moeilijk van elkaar te onderscheiden zijn. En waar je avatar je persoonlijkheid gaat bepalen in plaats van andersom. Om vervolgens als je digitale alter ego in de echte wereld te verschijnen.
Glad to see you guys. You guys are fucking patriots.
In deze gespiegelde werkelijkheid kwam Naomi Klein iemand tegen op wie ze niet zat te wachten. Een dubbelganger van zichzelf.
In 2011, I was in New York City, and it was during Occupy Wall Street. So there was a plaza that was taken over by demonstrators. I used a public restroom, and I could hear two women having a conversation as they were putting on makeup in the mirror, washing their hands. And one of them said to the other, "Did you read that article by Naomi Klein? She really does not understand our movement." And then they just started trashing me. I was sort of frozen in the stall going, oh my God, this is bringing back every bad memory of high school and Mean Girls and what had I written and why were they trashing it? The more I listened to them, the more I realized that I had not written the article they were discussing. They were talking about an article written by Naomi Wolf about Occupy Wall Street that was very sort of strange and conspiratorial. I just walked out and met the eyes of the women in the mirror and I just said, I think you're talking about Naomi Wolf. And they were very embarrassed.
Rising fascism.
Al jaren wordt Naomi Klein met Naomi Wolf verward. En dit was ook niet zo gek, want Wolf was net als Klein een linkse feminist die vaak in de media optrad.
Women like me and all of these other women in the women's movement have been very vocal for decades and decades and decades.
Maar het begon te wringen toen ze steeds verder in de complottheorieën afgleed en uiteindelijk overtuigd antivaxer werd.
To the police of New Haven, a crime is being committed. Fourth wave feminists.
Naomi's dubbelganger werd een kwelling.
I was very alarmed that there was somebody else who a lot of people thought was me. And this person, another writer named Naomi Wolf, used to be somebody who, it's not like I liked being confused with her. I never was a fan of the phenomenon, but I wasn't completely horrified by it until she really started going into conspiracy land and doing more and more things that I considered like highly embarrassing and very much not the kind of things that I would do.
The vaccine passports really are the last step. And, as someone said today, the hill worth dying on. It is geolocating you, and it can tabulate the searches you all have done historically, and it can read what happened on your social media as a group, and you as a group can be blackballed. Your social credit score can dial down, or you're all positive, right? None of you ever gets to shop for food. None of you ever gets your children into school.
Naomi Wolf really took a star turn on the right, like where she really went supernova with Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, was when she started making these claims about the vaccine apps, the vaccine verification apps, where she said, she put out this video saying vaccine verification app or vaccine apps equals slavery forever. And she puts out this video where she says that the apps can listen to your conversations. They know everywhere you're going. They know who you're with. And what this really is a plan to bring the Chinese-style social credit system to the West. And eventually they're going to determine where your kid goes to school and whether you can get a loan or not. And this goes absolutely viral. And Fox can't get enough of it. Bring on the ex-Democrat, feminist lady to go tell us that Joe Biden is launching a fascist Chinese coup in the United States. Of course, this is a wonderful message. But what was interesting, and first of all, it wasn't true, but what she was describing was surveillance capitalism. I mean, what she was describing was something that is true, which is the fact that we have lost a huge amount of our privacy to these tech companies who know vast amounts about us. And we all have a weird feeling about whether our phones are listening to our phone conversations and so on. And so, what I realized was that conspiracy culture gets the facts wrong, but the feelings right. And the feeling that they're describing is a feeling of living in a surveillance culture, and a feeling of not knowing who and what can be trusted. So, I think when there isn't a robust policy response to very real crises, then of course it's going to be co-opted by grifters and opportunists who are going to get the kind of juice that is there because these issues are real and people have a right to feel very uncomfortable about this and angry and upset and, to want to have some control over their data and their representations online. And that's the way in which doppelgangers hold up a mirror, I hope, should hold up a mirror to those of us on the left who have left these issues, I think, unattended for too long. I think the weaker the left became and the more obedient, the more fertile territory was grabbed by the far right.
It's the elites making the decisions. Think of all the bad decisions been made on globalism by this kind of scientific, engineering, managerial, financial elite. Look at where the country is. Look at where working class people are. Look where the middle class is, particularly from the financial crisis. People have been getting fucked.
The reason why we need to pay attention to Bannon is because Bannon is first and foremost a political strategist. What Bannon cares about is not what his guests are saying. It's who his guests represent, right? He's looking at an electoral map and he's thinking, how do we regain power? He was a big part of bringing Trump to power the first time, and he is very, very focused on bringing him to power once again. And he's not just focused on the U.S. He is focused on building what he calls like a national. He calls it a nationalist international. And it's interesting. One of the things that's interesting about listening to Bannon on a regular basis is you realize that his show is in many ways more international than much of U.S. media. Like if you watch MSNBC, you basically don't hear about other countries unless there's a war. But if you listen to Bannon, you hear every time, a far-right party in Europe or Latin America comes to power, or you have a feeling that you're part of something really transnational. The world of Giorgia Meloni and Geert Wilders and, this whole international network of far-right political figures that are coalescing, in part thanks to Steve Bannon, because he's woven together this network. That's what he's been doing since he left the White House.
Ik betaal €385 elk jaar weer. Ik kan het niet betalen met alleen een uitkering. En velen met mij.
Maar daarom wil ik samen met u in de komende 4 jaar de armoede in Nederland halveren.
De komende 4 jaar is te laat. We zijn te laat.
Dat moet stap voor stap gaan, mevrouw. Als ik het morgen kon doen, zou ik het morgen doen.
Weet u wat dat betekent? Hè? Ik wil het niet te persoonlijk maken, maar u staat hier nu met een wachtgeld van €15.000 per maand. Dat is wat u krijgt van de Europese Commissie. En die mevrouw kan €385 niet betalen. En u zegt, laten we even wachten. U kan wachten met dat geld. Mevrouw kan niet wachten. Mevrouw moet nu het geld hebben. Nee, ik was nog niet klaar. En dat de leider van de sociaal-democratie niet zegt... mevrouw, we gaan nu morgen dat eigen risico afschaffen... is een schande. U bent het contact met de werkelijkheid totaal verloren.
Wij maken de plannen om...
It's frightening to me because I think the history of European fascism shows that when the center collapses, when the center fails people, when it doesn't meet people's needs... and when the left isn't offering a real alternative, is fractured, is not, is just weak, then that is when the right rises. That is when the far right rises. And that exchange to me is really telling because it obviously shows a person who is in immediate need and immediate pain, who is suffering and who is looking to political leaders to address that suffering, not just recognize that it is real, but actually provide tangible answers to it. And the immediate move from Timmermans to talk about statistics, averages, a technocratic answer, I think speaks to why there is such a profound alienation. If you can't pay the bills, what does it matter if a politician is talking about cutting poverty in half? It matters if you personally can pay your bills. Who's to say you're going to be in the winning half of that, right? I mean, why would you talk about averages to a person in pain? And I think it just speaks to just a disconnect, that you're just living on another planet. Your reality is so far from this person's reality that you think they would care about these statistics, right? And that is what Wilders is capitalizing on. He sees that. He knows that. He knows that the language that his opponent is speaking is absolutely disconnected. So he doesn't have to offer a real solution. I mean, if there isn't a left that is in there going, actually, here's what we're going to do. We're going to organize your workplace. You know, we're going to have a living wage. We're going to, have a basic income, whatever it is, or have real universal health care so you don't have a deductible. Why should you even have that in the first place? So if there isn't that, then all you need to do really is just name the disconnect. Oh, those out-of-touch elites.
Io sono Giorgia, sono una donna, sono una madre, sono italiana, sono cristiana, non me lo toglierete! Non me lo toglierete!
Giorgia Meloni has no plans to stand up to transnational capital. What she's doing is she's capturing all of that anger and discontent and feeling of abandonment, and she's pivoting it towards, oh no, it's about these people who don't want you to be a woman or a Christian or an Italian. Who doesn't want Giorgia Meloni to be a mother? Who is telling Giorgia Meloni she can't be a mother or a Christian or a woman? Not any left that I know of. Maybe there's some undergraduates who get carried away with pronouns, but the point is it's an opportunity to take this anger that is real at very real economic forces and systems that are rigged against the vast majority of people on this planet. And they're saying, blame the immigrants, right? Don't blame the deindustrialization and the fact that there aren't jobs. Don't blame the fact that we've systematically underfunded the education system and the healthcare system. Just blame the immigrant, blame the trans kid, and so you take the energy of very real anger and discontent and you pivot it. So, I feel more than anyone, any of these figures, I feel I'm saddest about what Meloni represents because I have more direct experience of what might have been in Italy. It was the height of the alter globalization movement, as we called it, or in Italy they called it no global. So there was a huge protest in 2001 in Genoa. There were, I think, 300,000 people on the streets. And it was a progressive movement. I mean, it was trade unions, and it was small farmers and artisans and feminist organizations. And they were standing up against these global forces, but not in a xenophobic way. It was also pro-migrant. But it was about changing the rules of the system and really understanding how was this system rigged against the smaller players and against cooperatives and against the small farmers. It was a movement of solidarity, and it was a movement that was trying to understand what global capitalism looks like now, what rules are allowing the deindustrialization of so many communities, factory closures, wages going down, increased precarity of work, and so the way I see Meloni and what she represents in Italy is really, she's a symptom of the failure of those movements to have a political manifestation that would actually change those rules.
I want you all to take a look around and find someone you don't know. My question now to you is, are you willing to fight for that person who you don't even know as much as you're willing to fight for yourself?
You had the Bernie Sanders movement, multiple movements that did really try to have like structural, systematic change. Why did it fail?
Well, I mean, it did try, and you know, I was part of some of those attempts. You know, I was living in the States when the pandemic hit, and you know, what I was doing right before the pandemic was going on the road with Bernie Sanders. I went to 5 states. His slogan was "Not me, us," which I think was the most brilliant political slogan of my lifetime, precisely because it intervened in this culture of individualism. So many people are blaming themselves for the hardship of their life. They think that it's their fault that they can't pay their medical bills, that they can't meet their rent, that they can't pay their mortgage. They failed, and we live in a culture that does blame them. It's, oh, you didn't budget correctly, if you had been more frugal, if you had made better choices, if you'd perfected your brand, if you had better kids, something about you messed this up, right? And of course, Donald Trump represents like the sort of, you know, the ultimate competition, like what was Apprentice? All of these people fighting to get picked by the rich guy who was going to hire them, and you know, they had won the individualism sweepstakes. They had, you know, they got to ride up the golden elevator, and they were chosen. That's what capitalism wants us to do. But what Bernie was saying was, actually, we can all win. You know, we can, you should not feel ashamed that you can't pay your bills. The system was built to keep you from being able to pay your bills and then to profit from your debt. And as an individual, you can't fight that system. But collectively, we could fight that system.
Is there a far-right voter in each of us?
I'm not sure that there's a far-right voter in each of us. But I think that we are closer to the values of the far right in many cases than we might like to believe. You know, in the sense that, you know, if you ask a, you know, more centrist liberal voter if they could ever vote for the far right, they would say absolutely not. These are people who run on hate, right? They run on xenophobia, on the other. They want to ban the Quran, or they want to ban mosques, or they say these terrible things about immigrants. But then, you know, I would just say, how normalized, how comfortable, how skilled have we become at averting our eyes? You know, we are living in a time where hundreds of people drown in boats, and that is sort of a one-day news story when that happens in Europe, and where people vote for centrist parties who are making sure that those boats get turned around or don't get saved. So I think it's less that everybody would vote for the far right, and more that everybody increasingly would vote for a party that is moving further and further into a politics of normalizing mass death, which to me is the politics of the far right. A lot of fantasy, you know, science fiction, you know, has given us these stories of kind of the zombie apocalypse, right? Like suddenly your neighbors are out there, you know, wanting to eat your brain. You know, artists often use the figure of the double to get at this feeling of ominous threat of that flip of how we all contain the ability to be sort of worse versions of ourselves, crueler versions of ourselves. Suddenly your neighbors, the nice person down the street is carrying a pitchfork and a torch and they're coming for you, right? And there's a feeling that societies can flip in that way. That is what happened to Jews in Germany and Austria and the Netherlands in the 1940s. And it can happen. It can happen again. And so the figure of the double, I think, stands in for the way not just an individual can change, but a whole society can have this monstrous side. And I think we feel the monster and fear the monster precisely because we know our world is under tremendous stress. We know more people are going to come. We know more and more parts of our world are becoming uninhabitable through a combination of militarism, of climate change, of poverty. And nobody gets on a boat unless they absolutely have to, if that boat may very well go down. And we know that our own comforts, our electricity, our clothing, our food that we eat, our energy is entangled with the miseries of others. That is what it means to live in a globalized economy that has such tremendous inequality in it. The knowledge of our own entanglements with atrocities, whether it's our tax dollars buying the weapons, or whether it's our consumer choices that are enmeshed with enormous misery around the world, leads to this feeling of dread. Right? And that is also what the Malones and Wilders are tapping into. It's like, what if they come? What if they come for us? Right? And that is what, a film like Parasite, when the people living underground come above ground and they're mad, they want the good life. Or a film like Jordan Peele's Us, another doppelganger film, the people down below whose lives are tethered to the people above living in the light, decide to come up and sort of come after the people who are sort of living parasitically, right? Who are the parasites? We're the parasites. Like our comforts depend on the miseries of others. And we're afraid that the people, on some level, we're afraid that the people whose misery our lives depend on are going to come. And that is also the doppelganger fear. They're coming. So we actually have to figure out how to live together, right? And that is the project of the non-monstrous future, the non-horror future, is figuring out how to share what is left of this beautiful world, or else we're the monster.
Too many of our people are worshiping a false idol once again. They are enraptured by it. They are drunk on it. They are profaned by it.
I believe that Palestine is the unhealed open wound of our world. We see an image of a world upside down. The hope for me is that there's also a reassertion of the need for universalist values, movements that understand that all of our liberation and all of our safety are entangled with one another. Everything within the culture always sort of sends us back to our rooms. During COVID, that was literal. Go to your room. But even though intellectually we can understand that we can only confront these forces together, there's so many systems that are telling you to go back to your room and just try to do it all by yourself. So anything that can strengthen the bonds of connection to make us want to be together, to increase the draw as the society tries to push us back into our rooms, is going to help a lot. My students know that the system that they're in is failing them on multiple levels, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's the housing crisis, whether it's the normalization of the shredding of international law. And so they're interested in system change. They want a future where actually everyone is equal. It's so radical. You know, it is radical. It actually is radical to imagine a future where everyone is equal. It's not a namby-pamby liberal value. It's a radical transformative value. And I think people are fighting for it in the streets, and they're being lied about and accused of being, you know, pro-terrorist or whatever the latest lies are. But when I talk to my students, they're fighting for life, you know? And they can't believe that their leaders, their so-called leaders, want them to accept a world where children, you know, get dismembered and hospitals get bombed and aid workers get targeted, and we're supposed to all act like that's normal. They won't do it, you know? And you know, I see my job as being like, you're not crazy. You're paying attention, and you still have a beating heart, and keep at it.